Let's start. Good afternoon and good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for the second webinar in our series, focused on exploring the present and future trends, as well as new adoptions within the US legal industry. At Draft and Draft, we are committed to providing valuable insight that help navigate the ever-evolving legal landscape. I'm thrilled to announce that today's session will be moderated by Anjali Pahwa, Senior Vice President of Legal at Draft and Craft. Anjali brings to the table a profound understanding of the US legal landscape, coupled with years of experience. Her strategic guidance has empowered numerous law firms to optimize their operations and elevate client service standards. Without further ado, I'll hand over the reins to Anjali, who will introduce our esteemed panel of experts and kickstart today's enriching discussion. Over to you, Anjali.
Well, thank you so much, Sagar. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. But as we move forward, before I would like to introduce the distinguished panelists we have today. So we have Frank Ramos, who's from Clarke Silverglate, and he's a partner over there. His experience is rich into product liability, catastrophic personal injury, commercial litigation. But other than the fact that he is an ace attorney, he has actually authored over 20 books for lawyers, and he's an avid writer. And the interesting part is that he is also a mentor to so many young attorneys and law students. And we have Roy Sexton, who's joining us from Clarke Hill. He's the Chief Marketing Officer, and he brings to this discussion a unique and different aspect. He is a problem solver and a growth enabler. And so we are really looking forward to knowing more from Roy. And I also want to tell that he's been actively involved in the Legal Marketing Association, the LMA. And so in his role as he's been the immediate past president for the LMA, and he brings in a lot of expertise from there because he's been involved at multiple levels. He's been associated with so many firms or has been connected with so many firms. So I'm sure that by the end of today's discussion, we are all going to be going home or going back to work in some cases with definitely some more knowledge and good tips on how to make it, how to make it successful for all of us in this changing landscape. The legal industry is changing and we all need to adapt. So let's get into this. The first thing which we want to, and how we want to start this discussion is that there is a shift. The shift has been happening for almost 2 decades now. It's been gradual, and the shift can be seen in the newer models of how these law firms are evolving. There have been secondment firms which are coming in. There are flexible models of work which are coming in. Virtual law firms are there. And normally when we think about virtual law firms or virtualization per se, we think it's something which is pandemic oriented, but I feel that virtualization started way before that. And the pandemic probably has given it a push, because it's forced everybody to adopt it. And again, there are multiple reasons why people are looking into these options. There are cost benefits. You are able to connect with national and global talent. You are able to give a better working structure to your team. And as I said, outsourcing benefits are equally there over here. So that said, I would like to start today's discussion with understanding as to how are you witnessing this change in the United States, and how are firms embracing this change? How are they able to cope with it? So Roy, would you like to start on this and give us a perspective?
Sure. Yeah, and I offer the caveat that a lot of my commentary is going to be framed from the end of operational support, specifically marketing and business development,
Right.
and from the lens of what I've seen at Clarke Hill. And I'm a marketing person, so I can't help myself. But you know what I would say about Clarke Hill that has been interesting. I've been here about 6 years, and prior to that, we were talking about in the prep. I had been in one time zone before that, and Clarke Hill we have 716 attorneys, 27 offices. We have 2 international locations in Dublin and Mexico City, and it was the first time I'd worked at a firm that expansive or with that range of talent. And it took me a minute, but I think what we've seen is on scale, we were already thinking about these things before the pandemic. We've grown as many mid-size and large firms have done through acquisition. And in so
Right.
doing, when I arrived, we had a bit of a fragmented culture. We had a lot of regional outposts that hadn't quite integrated into Clarke Hill. So my task was to figure out what our brand would be in that. My team was all over the country. Some of them I never even met, and eventually did. But I learned to work remotely, learned to work on scale, work through Zoom. This was before the pandemic, and everybody had to do so. I think what we found when you look on paper, our legal marketing team is smaller than what would typically be expected at a firm of this size. Would I mind a few more
Okay.
people? No. But we've learned on scale to go from the days of there's a staff person that's supporting all the needs and wants of a geographic location to there are staff people who have functional expertise, and they can do that on scale for 27 offices, and it doesn't really matter where they're located. It took a little while because the culture, the sentimentality I think that attorneys have, they like to have someone they can just walk down the hall and find. It takes a minute for people to adjust to that, to adjust to time zones, to adjust to that person isn't maybe available exactly when I want them to, so I'm going to have to email them. I know this sounds really low rent, but that's, they say culture eats strategy every day, and I think there's truth to that. So when we finally got to the pandemic, we were ready. It was not that big a leap for us. We just happened to be in our basements, not going into the office.
Yeah.
Post-pandemic, the firm has continued to look at particularly geographic locations. We leaned into the fact that people are now comfortable working from a lot of different locations, and we want them to. We want the
Right.
attorneys to visit other cities and be at home and connect with clients where the clients are. So we have gone through a phase of downsizing our physical space, not our staff, but our physical space, because we don't need it. We can go with hoteling options, and we've created more collaborative spaces in which people can work. So I think, whether I'm answering your question coherently or just from the particular perspective I have, I think what I've seen, at least in this firm, and I know like firms are going through similar exercises, I just feel like I got lucky that I ended up at a firm that was already leaning this way and thinking about
Right.
these things and working efficiently, and also, responding to what's happening culturally and using that as a market and business opportunity.
Right. Frank, would you like to weigh in on this and tell us a bit about how things have worked out in your firm or in the industry in general?
Sure. As Roy mentioned, the pandemic was a huge seismic shift for the legal industry, and legal always seems to trail other industries and seems to be one of the last adopters of technology or other changes. And with the pandemic, we determined 2 things. One, we obviously could work remotely, and 2, we didn't need to have people working with us right next to us. They could be somewhere else. In Florida, as long as they were licensed in Florida, they lived in another state, they could certainly do that. And so once we got out and everybody got out of the pandemic, I think a lot of people did reduce their footprint, their physical footprint, and they also looked for staffing beyond their immediate geographic region. The 2 biggest costs to any law firm are, 1 is payroll and 2 is space. And I think the pandemic helped us redefine both of them in terms of space. Obviously, a lot of firms reduced their footprint. A lot of firms determined that they didn't need to be in the big, shiny buildings. If people wanted to come in, they could rent space in other nice buildings, but not sort of in the inner city, maybe more in the suburbs, which was easier to get to and closer to people's homes anyway. And then as to staffing, not only were they looking at lawyers maybe beyond the immediate geographic region, they were looking at staffing maybe even outside the country and exploring the options. So it really, again, legal always seems to be the last to adopt changes, but the pandemic forced us to all do that, and I don't think we're going back either in terms of how we staff or how we work remotely.
Right. But
And I think,
that's pretty
well,
true that legal is the last to move because there is a bit of rigidity. They don't want to move from the conventional ways. And even though there are these firms who have tried to be the trendsetters, they've tried to bring in change, it's not been so easy. So people actually struggled during the pandemic. It was a big change for everybody. You were saying
and
something, Roy. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. I didn't mean to interrupt you. We joke sometimes in the Legal Marketing Association, lawyers like to be first to be second. So they kind of look to see what are other people doing around them, and then they go, oh, I'll do that. I do think the pandemic, I felt like I did some of my best work during the first year of the pandemic because
Okay.
a lot of the noise fell away from a marketing perspective. We didn't have the kind of social events that attorneys seem to think people want to go to. They had to rely on social media and thought leadership, which I'd been beating the drum about for quite a while, but it's all that was available. They couldn't take people to breakfast and golf outings and things. We're seeing some of that come back. It's coming back with more of an intentionality. I think you also have to, again, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Attorneys will look at what other people are doing and then adopt that, but they also will respond to what happens financially. So I think they saw in those years that we were saving a lot on travel, we were saving a lot on event expenses, and that meant more money in their pockets at the end of the year. And I'm never averse to saying that to them. When someone says, I want to sponsor a rodeo for $50,000, I'm like, well, that's less money you're going to have at the end of the year. Do you really want to do that? And are you really reaching the people you want to reach? I know that's far afield of your question, but I think the business people got to move a little more center stage in the conversations. I feel like there's a tension now. You see some firms struggling with this. Some have leadership that want everything back the way it was, but now their clients are speaking up. Our GC panel last year, we had for the annual conference, we had a gentleman, Arash Daruti from Fender, and I loved what he said, and I've quoted it everywhere I can. He said, don't take me to a football game. Don't take me to dinner. Don't show me there's a lot of waste in your organization by showing me how pretty your office is. Come to my office and see how I work and learn how to solve my problems. And I think that client voice is getting stronger by the day. And it's hard. And I think generationally, it's hard for some folks who are used to a different model to accept that you've got to adapt or die. I think we're going to see more market consolidation because of this. I think the cost structure for cybersecurity and everything is getting more prohibitive, and firms are going to have to look from a business perspective if they want to keep the margins they've had historically.
Right. So as I said, cost effectiveness is definitely one of the big things what's pushing towards this change. And at the end of the day, that's what the clients need.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's pretty much true. So while we are moving to this change, while this shift is happening and people are moving into these this kind of flexible work models, virtualization, technology is playing a very big part over here. And technology is, as we were talking, attorneys are normally very rigid towards anything. Even technology, I personally, oh yes, even today I've seen a lot of firms who struggle with technology, and the pandemic forced them to come on to case management softwares, which no doubt has made life easier for them. But technology is such that you need to work alongside it for it to actually work. Technology in itself is not going to work for you.
No.
So, but I do see the struggle over there. And but technology, and the struggle is there even in terms of not only the attorneys, but in terms of the staff. There is reluctance, or there is a gap in the knowledge on how to use the technology in an efficient way. So there is a struggle over there. And Roy, I know this is this is not exactly your area in terms of
it won't.
marketing.
I'll comment anyway. It's fine.
Yeah, but you would know what's happening, and in the industry, and how are people coping with it, or just throw in your bit on this.
Well, yeah, I again, I'm a bit left of center. You're going to regret inviting me. I worked in healthcare. I worked in consulting, management consulting for a little bit, and then healthcare for a long time, and then legal. So I have different kind of
Yeah.
lenses I bring to things. And I was there when healthcare was going through its own digital transformation and the centralized patient record, which they still can't seem to get a handle on. So I saw the challenge doctors faced with, look, I just want a doctor. Why do I have to learn this new tool? But the ones that thrived and survived in their practices were the ones that embraced the technology. What I think is different in healthcare versus legal, and this would be I had enough Six Sigma in my life, I'd go to the root cause. It's not even about technology. It's about the culture that enables technology to work. When doctors were fighting against it, it didn't work. When they embraced it, it did. Those that embraced it earlier thrived. I find
Yeah.
in legal, there is still this propensity with the operational team and the attorneys to treat them as hired hands to handle the punch list that the attorneys have come up with, versus saying to their IT folks, you're not here just to help me learn how to turn on my laptop. I need you to find the solutions that will drive efficiency, that will bring, and we have that here, we're lucky, but I see a lot of IT teams that are hamstrung because they're spending all day, quite frankly, placating attorney needs versus being truly strategic and bringing solutions to the firm and having the latitude and the capital to implement them. Because that's the other thing, you empower the team and they come up with great solutions, and then the firm says, oh, we don't want to make that investment, but we're going to sponsor these 8,000 things over here that really
Yeah.
aren't bringing a return. So it requires a change of mindset, and it does require visionary leadership, because the attorneys themselves, they are the product you're selling, and they shouldn't have to know necessarily, but they should be introduced to these concepts in a way that says this is going to make your work easier, better, and you're going to make more money in the end if we do this properly. But I know it sounds simplistic, but having been over a decade in legal, I see this time and time again. They let the internal politics sour the great idea, and then it never gets implemented, or it gets implemented and there are some attorneys with big books of business that don't want to play. They don't want to participate in the CRM. They don't want to follow the whatever protocols for knowledge sharing, and they're allowed not to. Well, the minute you allow some people not to be part of a system, the data isn't as pure or as useful, especially when you talk about knowledge management. If certain partners aren't required to participate and share what's going on, how do you do cross-selling? How do you develop? How do you grow? How do you develop your talent to benefit from other partners? And one final point in this, I mean, I benefit from having been at Deloitte. They had this 25 years ago. It was like falling off a log, and it was a requirement. You came in as a business analyst and you were there, you were to put your data in, you were supposed to update your profiles, make sure that was a requirement to move ahead in the organization. And I think law firms don't start early with some young talent and say, this is the expectation. In addition to billable hours and being a great lawyer, there's data hygiene, and you need to be a participant in that. So again, I'm a mile wide and an inch deep, so take of that what you will, but those are some of my observations.
Right. I mean, technology is, yes, helpful. And then there is AI, which is coming into play. And I know Frank would have a lot to share on this, because he has a lot of expertise on both subjects. And there is a fear with AI as well. But how can one actually embrace that? Is it going to be good? Is it not going to be good? Which way is it going? How can actually attorneys make technology friendly for them? How can they make it better for themselves in terms of their work and make themselves more successful?
Yeah, I think, again, like with everything else, legal is sort of behind on AI. You're seeing some of the large firms been in that space for a while, trying to generate their own large language models. And you're seeing certain sectors in legal getting involved, but for the most part, people are still exploring the technology, but not committing to it. Last year in March, when ChatGPT 4 passed the bar exam at the 90th percentile, that really got everybody's attention. And one would expect that there would have been a wide adoption of AI, and that's slow. It's happening, but it's been slow. You see a lot of platforms creating some sort of AI component, like Westlaw, the two big legal research giants having an AI component. You're seeing a lot of folks in the contract space, Ironclad, a bunch of other companies generating platforms for contracts, due diligence, everything else. And more, I think the expectation is that AI is going to redefine what we do as lawyers. And that it's not to replace us, but lawyers who use AI will replace those who don't. So for those who are watching us, I think the best advice I can give you is try to learn as much about AI, learn about what platforms provide AI, evaluate what firms and your clients are doing with it, and start figuring out which platforms make the most sense for you in your practice to adopt and to secure licenses for, because it's only be a matter of time where using AI has become part of the standard of care for all of us. And it's just, they're very powerful tools. They have some problems, obviously. You don't want to upload confidential proprietary information. They can hallucinate or make things up at times. We're familiar with the examples in New York and Colorado and other states of lawyers who basically went to ChatGPT and other platforms, asked them to write a brief, and they had made up cases and citations. I think that's just bad lawyering. That's not understanding the tool and what it's used for.
Yes.
Correct. Yeah.
Tool in the wrong way. But yeah, it really was. So I think just like people in our industry were slow to adopt to Zoom and Teams, and we're slow to adopt to social media and LinkedIn, we were slow to adopt to doing things remotely. I'm finding the same hesitancy here because, I think just lawyers, we're just kind of risk adverse by nature for the most part. Even lawyers who are on the plaintiff side, who are kind of risk getters, even they are somewhat risk adverse. So it's understandable. These platforms are progressing, they're evolving, but each day they're getting better. ChatGPT 5 is probably weeks, at most months away. Claude 3 just dropped. Gemini 1.5, I think, just was released. So all these platforms are improving, and they all have, for the most part, some sort of corporate form that if you went to these companies and said, I want to have a closed system for my firm or my legal team, they could work with you and do that as well. So that's where I'm trending. I'm seeing more and more firms exploring platforms that have AI and considering creating their own platforms.
And I think
so.
If I might add one piece on this, I don't mean to be provocative, but here I go. Some of my challenge, I think, with the way the industry's talking about AI is it feels so superficial. A few years ago, it was blockchain, it was the Internet of Things, it was NFTs, it was Clubhouse, it was, there's this sort of rush to throw it into every article without a lot of depth of thinking. And for anybody to say, well, I'm debating whether or not I want to embrace AI, too late. It's everywhere. It's like saying I'm arguing against air and water. It's been in your iPhone for years. It's in most of the major platforms we're using already and have been using. Our SEO platform, our social media distribution, there are AI components in that, and there always have been. So I was a little befuddled. You're right, Frank, in that ChatGPT seemed to be the thing that brought all the boys to the yard. But it's been there already. So let's be mindful and thoughtful again about, look at what your business is. Where do you need greater efficiencies? And always explore the tools that will bring that. And don't put AI in this sort of separate box that you're assessing, because it's in everything. And my only tip to everyone, if they're still agnostic, and this book is 25 years old and I'm dating myself, read The World is Flat. It doesn't talk about AI. But it has one case study after another, and the one that always speaks to my soul is the music industry that thought they were selling plastic discs or photography, and they thought they were selling film, and what they were really selling was memories or music. And so their business model got taken away from them because someone else said, people don't want to buy plastic discs for 20, 30 bucks. They want it streaming, and our telephone co-opted the music industry and has changed the way we interact with music. That's going to happen to legal. And if we continue to dither around about what are we going to do and how are we going to handle it, some other disruptor is going to come in that does not have much respect for all of the superstructures that have protected the industry, and they're going to take over. And I don't mean to be nihilist, but we have to be mindful of that and, just be open.
True. Absolutely. I agree with that. Any particular tools which you feel are useful, which are being commonly used or should be used to make things better on the operational standpoint in a law firm? Either of your firms. Yeah. Frank, would you like to take that up?
Sure. In terms of platforms, first of all, you have to define for your firm or for your company what tasks you're trying to perform. If it's legal research, you look at the platforms that are in that space that are AI enhanced. If it's case management, there's a number of platforms. You really have to, I recommend and I suggest to most firms that they create an AI committee. I know it's another committee, but have the 2, 3, maybe half dozen people in your firm that are most tech savvy and most lean into that space. And not to suggest that they're not risk adverse, but they appreciate the importance and significance of the technology, and have them first define what tasks could be enhanced using technology. And it could be 1, it could be half dozen, it could be 2 dozen, and then determine which companies are in that space for creating or putting out platforms that address those tasks. And understand that there are a lot of platforms coming each day online, and some of them are good and some of them are not. Most everyone is overselling and underperforming.
Yes.
And you have to go into it with your eyes open. Even companies like Westlaw and Lexis, for a long time, I thought were kind of overselling their AI platform. Because all these companies, they have sales teams, and sales teams want to close deals, and they want to sell you what they want to sell you so they can get their commission. And not to say that they're going to lie, but they may exaggerate or not fully appreciate what you need, because they're salespeople and not lawyers.
And then that's the case everywhere, in everything which we do. Yeah.
Right. And so their prism is sell. It's not like, how does this help me as a lawyer preparing and revising this contract, preparing for trial, whatever it is. So it's time consuming, but important to, one, understand the platform, what it actually provides, and work with a company that's been around at least long enough that you feel that they're not going anywhere. And whatever contract you sign with them, you've got to kind of look at the boilerplate language, because you want to make sure you keep your data. You're not, giving them the data. They're not controlling your data and all that. But that's what I recommend. Like firms, one, deciding what tasks we need to have be AI enhanced or tech enhanced. Determine what platforms provide those services, test those platforms, get demos, and get trial performances for a week, 2, whatever it is, and then discuss it with your team, determine what the financial output would be and the return on investment would be for those platforms, and then adopt them, and then create a written policy as to how to use them with your team. It's a long process, and it's a process that has to happen pretty quickly, because all these platforms are constantly evolving, and clients are having more expectations. And it's only a matter of time before clients are going to expect that AI is going to drive down our price models, and that I'm going to see more and more firms offering more flat fee models, because the hourly model may not really work for them anymore. Because if 50% of their tasks are going to be done by, or largely done by AI, it's hard to run a firm that way. So expect more flat fee arrangements going forward.
That's Frank, that was exactly something which I was wanting to come next. Over the years, the billable hours has always been a question, and in terms of how relevant it has been, of course, to measure the performance of an attorney within the firm, but also with the perspective of how you are delivering to the client. That is also changing. And as you correctly said, that there is a flat fee model which is there, and there are other flexible working models which have come up in these new age law firms. So anything more to that which you would want to add as to how you think in the industry that change is happening, and how strongly are people actually still holding on to the billable model, the billable hours?
Yeah, I think the billable hour model will stay with us for a while, I think, but on the periphery and closer to the center, it will become more the alternate fee models are going to become more progressive and more adoptable. And even the way we educate law students is going to change. I think it's going to be one that's very much tech driven, understanding how to do prompt engineering in terms of how to interact with these platforms, determining how a project can be reduced to tasks and how those tasks can be done in part or largely by AI. It's kind of similar to how cars were manufactured back in the early 1900s, when Ford came along and said, we don't need artisans to build the car from scratch. We're going to create an assembly line, and each person will be a semi-skilled worker, and they're interested to do this task. And that's been true for
Yeah.
most industries in manufacturing, so that most of that's been exported elsewhere. We don't need a skilled artisan. You can have somebody who are semi-skilled and do the same tasks. And I think more and more we're going to be looking at litigation and finding out which of those aspects can be outsourced and done elsewhere, either through people elsewhere or through technology, or a combination of the two, and leave very high level thinking to the lawyers who are, wherever they are, US, Canada, wherever else they're working.
And I think you really have to listen to your clients on this. So my first firm was a mortgage foreclosure firm, which is a very different beast than the corporate firms I've worked at since. And coming out of healthcare, and I probably still am blithely unaware of some of the nuances amongst, but I just keep barreling forward like the Kool-Aid man. But we were already at a model where we were supporting a fairly small set of mortgage houses out there, and it was right during the financial crisis. So they had very high expectations they were auditing us all the time. They wanted to make sure we had security clearance. A lot of the questions we're seeing law firms now face more broadly, but because of the financial side of the house, it was pretty draconian. But that was the arrangement. I mean, they were looking at, foreclosure it's sometimes they call them a mill for a reason. It is piecework almost of a kind. So their pricing model was looking at volume and outcome versus how much time went into it. When it went to the litigation, then obviously the billable hour came into play more. But they were already measuring us, and they had systems where they were looking at the outcomes and what they were getting from different firms. And if they were getting the outcome they wanted financially, they kept their business with that firm. And if they didn't, and they were monitoring us, they were keeping their report cards. We developed our own report card system so we could anticipate what they would be coming with. Having had that experience in my life, I think the corporate firms, that's coming. And I was at dinner last night with some other legal marketers, and they were saying GM back in 1992 brought all their legal counsel together and 8,000 firms they were using, and 1992, and they had a ranking of what outcomes they were getting and how the measures were stacking up, and then they lopped a bunch off. That was 1992. I was in college still. So I can only imagine that if our clients have gotten very sophisticated to the way they're measuring the outcomes, they are going to ask for different arrangements. So get into that conversation sooner rather than later. Don't wait for them to come to you with the report that you're surprised by. Pull that. If you need to pull AI models together, if you need to pull your smart financial folks together, start looking at that data now, and anticipate that. Get to your clients before they come to you. And if you need to talk about different arrangements for fees, do that, because you're going to go to another firm and they're going to ghost on you. So.
But as part of a law firm, do you feel that pressure already? Are you already offering different types of billing models?
we will have those conversations, and I feel like we have client service teams. We have taken a human-centered, intentional approach to that, where we're having those conversations with folks. We have basically a diagnostics team that's looking in finance. It's looking at that data on a regular basis. We have dashboards people, the entire firm can access on our SharePoint, so people can see in real time, what is their revenue looking like? Who are our primary clients? Who's ebbing? Who's flowing? And we can do some diagnostics there.
Yeah. Frank, what about you in your firm? Do you feel that sort of a pressure coming in from the clients?
Yeah, I speak to a lot of clients about their use of AI, and I'm finding that clients are trying to figure out AI not only for their business partners and how their business partners are using it on the business side, but also how their legal departments can use it and how their outside counsel can use it, especially with large insurers who are constantly trying to find a way to reduce overhead and outside legal spends. They handle so many cases, tens of thousands of them, some of them. And so if they can find technology to improve the outcome and improve the data analytics to figure out what a case you should settle for, what you should pay to outside counsel, that's something that they're looking into. And then also how outside counsel can use AI safely and effectively without undermining the representation of them or their insureds, but also improving outcome in terms of how they take depositions or try cases, and also dealing with a lot of what they consider fungible aspects to litigation and how that can be enhanced by or reduced by AI.
Yeah. So with this change which is happening, and as we discussed, that there is a lot of struggle which is there in adapting to this change in at various levels. How are we creating a collaborative workspace which is healthy and balanced at the same time? How are we managing the cultural shift which is happening? Frank, would you want to weigh in on that?
Sure. I guess it depends on what level and what position you're discussing. I think for most partners, it's easy for us to work remotely anywhere because we know what we're doing. When it comes to young lawyers, you need some more face time because they're trying to learn. What we do as lawyers is largely still an apprenticeship model. It's still a model where more senior lawyers train more younger lawyers. And so there needs to be some efforts in FaceTime, perhaps through Zoom or other platforms. But if you can get the people physically together in some way, even if it's not every day, but maybe once or twice a day, every week, every day a week, but once or twice a week, that's very helpful. When it comes to staffing, I don't know if you need people locally. Because there's a lot of staffing issues. It's more rote, and I think a lot of times lawyers just like to have their legal assistant outside their office. They like to have their paralegal down the hall. But once you get acclimated to not having that, which we all did for a while during the pandemic, and then some people reverted back to their old ways, but we all learned that that's possible. We all learned that legal assistants, paralegals, associates, we could all work remotely, still serve our clients, and still work collaboratively. It was harder. It was different. It required more effort in certain regards, but it was certainly doable. And it had certain benefits. People didn't have to spend, an hour, 2 hours commuting. They didn't have to spend hours, eating out, running to the local restaurant at lunch, maybe save money on dry cleaning, whatever it was. And so there was a lot of cost benefit analysis, not only reducing space for law firms, but reducing individual costs for the people who could work remotely. So I think firms who are open-minded about remote work, and some are and some aren't, are always going to have an advantage in terms of hiring and retaining their team.
But where do you think the bent is? Is it really towards branching out in terms of the staff being outside the offices, or is it still
I
that
think
people want them back?
Yeah, I think for a while,
where is it?
I think for a while everybody was working from home, and then everybody got tired from working from home, and the pendulum swung one way and then the other. And I think right now we're kind of in the mix. I think it really is a personal thing. There are certain firms that are very progressive and expansive in terms of letting people work from home. Some aren't. Some feel like they're being taken advantage of, so they can't see you, what you're doing, although realistically you're in your office. I don't know, anybody's just watching you while you're working.
But then that's where the tech plays in. Tech plays a lot of firms, it's a big role over there.
Yeah, some firms use the keystroke and some other things. I'm not a huge fan of that, but obviously, for lawyers, like we bill by the hour for the most part, and paralegals bill by the hour, so you can see our hours whether we're working or not, and that's a good way of determining whether people are being productive. Staff, obviously, if you are asking them to file or prepare, do whatever they're doing, and it's consistently not getting done, then that person may not be the right person to work remotely. But that doesn't take a whole lot of time to figure out. And people will take advantage of anything. People could be in the office and take advantage of it. They can close their door and
George Costanza took naps under his desk.
Right, exactly. So I don't think it's the model. I think it's the person, and the person wants to take advantage, they'll take advantage, and that really comes down to good interviewing and hiring practices. That doesn't really, again, same thing, going back to AI. If somebody wants to use AI to draft a motion from scratch and I review it, that's really the person. So,
and the kind of culture you create. I mean, again, I feel like I've become a walking commercial for Clarke Hill, but remember, I'm the marketing person, so I have it.
Yes.
But we have always been rather entrepreneurial in the way we look at how can we create scale with support. Like I said, in the marketing team, we figured out how to centralize people, so by function, doesn't matter where they are. Does that frustrate some people who are, again, used to walking down the hall and finding somebody? But quite frankly, the work is better when you come at it with some intentionality. So if you really want to measure for outcomes, and we do that here, to Frank's point, it's about how you hire, how you manage them, and what guidance you give them. I mean, I sit down with my folks and I
Yeah.
say, what do you want in your career? I assume you don't want to be in this role for the rest of your life. Let's have that open dialogue so I can bring you the project so I can see their growth. And if they're growing, again, I don't care if they're on the moon. We have a hybrid model here, and it's 3 days a week, 2 days off, but it's no one is with a checklist seeing who's coming in and out of the office. Nobody's paying that much attention. But people, it took a minute, but I like coming in a couple days a week. I'm an only child and an introvert, and I'd much prefer to be in my basement. But I do like a couple days of engagement, and I get to be around our C-suite, and we have conversation. You might have lunch with somebody. What people keep saying is culture is all been serendipitous for time immemorial, and it's not just law firms. It's any company you've ever worked in. Culture is accidental and intentional at the same time. You can have pizza days and you can do charity events, and that's great. And some of it is just having people around who want to be around. So if people are opting to be in the office that day, chances are they want to be there. They're going to be easier to work with, happier to be around. You're going to enjoy that dynamic more, and it's going to bring more people into the office. So again, there's a
Right.
story I tell too much about Walt Disney, who's problematic, I know. But apparently, and I don't know if this is apocryphal, they were building Disneyland, and there was a garden
Yeah.
or a flower bed between Tomorrowland and Main Street, and people were walking through the flower bed, and all the gardeners said, we need to put a fence around that. And Walt Disney said, no, we need to put a sidewalk there. Law firms never let the sidewalk happen. They
Yeah.
want to dictate, they want to put the rules in place, the protocol. Sometimes you just have to let, with guidance and shaping and
Yeah.
saying, here's where we're all headed, what we want to become, but then see how it morphs, see how people respond. And if you give people autonomy, which they crave, and meaningful work, they're going to deliver. The bad apples are always going to be there. Don't manage to the lowest common denominator, manage to the highest
Yeah.
common denominator and bring people along. And the bad people more often than not opt out because they know they're not long for this world.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We need to look at the bigger picture there.
Yeah. And then you can look creatively at, do we outsource some function? Do we keep it in-house? You can have an adult collaborative conversation, and people aren't possessive about their territory and their turf and their person and all that. But until you get to that point where you feel truly at ease in the space for yourself. I mean, people have been talking about authenticity and inclusion, and they don't know what that really means. It means, let me be myself here, knowing I still want to be a professional and I'm accepted for all flavors of who I am. And then I'm going to have real dialogue with you, and we're going to come to good solutions together.
Yeah. Yep. Right. So we are, I think, pretty much right on time. I would, any closing remarks before we start addressing any questions which are there in the audience? We know that, as I said, the change is there. And as we say, change is the only thing which is constant. We need to learn and we need to adapt and we need to, move on to the next thing. Any closing remarks from Frank and Roy, both of you, before we move on to any questions which are there?
Listen to the Franks and the Roys in your firms. They're there and they care. And often
Yes.
I've been in those firms where, and I will not name names, but if you go on my LinkedIn, you can figure it out. Where it was, I said, look, I can bring you so much, but I need some support and some help, and I'm dying on the vine. Well, if we bring you help, what are you going to do all day? Well, I'm going to bring you big ideas. I'm going to help you grow. And the minute I heard that, the minute I knew I didn't need to be in that organization. And I think often firms, but healthcare did it too, the innovative, bright thinker is sometimes a little maybe challenging, but it's because they care. So listen to them, lean into them, give them a space to play and try things, and the time. Again, the billable hour, I think, does hurt some of us in the operational side because everyone thinks in these increments and every minute must be occupied with busyness. No, the human mind needs time to think, and not just when I'm at home in the shower. I need to read, I need to digest, and that is benefiting my work. So don't constrain me in that way. And that's what I would say, that I will say that till I get run out of this industry,
Right. Let's hope it doesn't happen anytime soon.
Yeah, it could be happening now. I don't know.
Come on. Frank, anything from your end?
Sure. I mean, I think technology is just changing the industry, and it goes beyond AI. It goes into technology we use to present and to communicate and every other aspect of it. And we're all very busy as lawyers, and our practices are busy, but I think we all owe it to ourselves to keep our finger on the pulse of what the changes are and bring it to the attention of our teams and explore whether or not it makes sense for us. And that could become a full-time job. I understand that, but there has to be some intentionality there, and just not saying, well, I don't have time for this. Eventually someone will decide for us what we need to use, or clients will. Then it's too late. So you really have to stay ahead of that curve.
Oh, I got a question. Just for me,
Go
from
ahead.
Danish or Mohammed. I don't know. Hi, thank you.
Yep. Okay.
How do you measure the effect of marketing efforts on getting and keeping clients in the firm's overall growth? I'm glad you asked that question. So there are what we sometimes call vanity metrics that in other life, we would call leading metrics. So I like to think about it as a funnel. At the top end of the funnel, I want to be growing as big an audience as I can and then segmenting it down to core decision making. So as a marketer, I first look at engagement with our website, our social media reach. We get about 12 million on our social media. Engagement, 69%. How many people are viewing our videos? About 750,000 annually. What do our socials look like? Again, what are the initial read? There are more sophisticated platforms, and I'm looking at them. We don't have it yet, where you can track and see who is visiting your website, what are they looking at, and you can then track who they are and what they're doing. We did some account-based marketing as well, where we could see who was accessing digital ads and were they then driven to the website, and we could find out who they were, what company, et cetera, and then we could target those companies that are of most interest to us. So that's at the top end of the funnel. But then as you're measuring in your pipeline, look at first off, the firm needs some point of focus. We can't measure all things at all times. So where are those industries that are your strongest, where you have the most revenue potential? Then you can take those broader metrics and start to look directly at companies you either currently have in your thrall or that you're pursuing. Are they accessing your information? Are they showing up for your webinars? Are they taking the meeting? And again, if you have a CRM, you can measure that in the pipeline and see that movement forward. And then ultimately, you need a pitch and proposal team that is actively getting that content out. And we have a dashboard of all of that, and we look at how many active pitches have gone out, which have been successful, and we use that directionally for the attorneys, because again, attorneys sometimes, no offense to Frank, they want to be all things to all people and throw everything at a wall and see if it sticks. Well, that's not efficient. So you can't respond to every pitch that comes your way. You have to respond to the ones you are likely to win. So we use that pitch data aggressively then to say, I know you really think the Saskatchewan Sunday Times is going to hire you. We have not had a lot of luck in that space. We have had luck over here. Let's put our energies on that. So I don't know if I answered your question, but that's how I think about it. There's kind of macro level, real nice, fun numbers to show, like we're out there, people hearing of us. But at the end of the day, you have to move them down to that narrow part of the funnel where they're making a purchasing decision.
There's one more question. I think Frank already added his view and insight on this, but are there any specific technologies or tools that you recommend for law firms looking to optimize their workspace, design and improve overall team collaboration? And there's one more. Could you provide insight into the type of collaboration tools and communication platforms that have been most effective for geographically dispersed legal teams?
Frank, I think that question is directed towards you.
Sure. I mean, I don't know if I have a preference.
Good luck.
Obviously, we use Teams and we use Zoom a lot to just keep everybody together virtually, and that's true for anything else. We also do a lot of webinars. I encourage law firms to use webinars as a way to reach out to clients. If you have a Zoom account or a Teams account, and there are other platforms out there, those are the only two. And they all have a price point, but they're all very moderate price point. It's a great way to reach a lot of diverse people. It's inexpensive. It's not disruptive. You don't have to leave anywhere. You don't have to pay for space or pay for food. And so probably not directly answer your question, but so much of what we do as lawyers is market and try to attract clients and continue having clients come into our firm and serve them, because you don't want to be serving just one or two clients. Those clients go and you're turning off the lights and letting people go as well. So I'm finding that doing webinars and participating in webinars, having your own podcast, participating in podcasts, being a guest on podcasts, these are all low-cost tools that you can use to sort of expand and exceed your just personal reach in terms of just being able to be out there on the internet and reaching people through these various platforms.
May I yes and on that? And then if you're a guest on a podcast, you aggressively use LinkedIn and reshare and tag the people. If you're hosting a podcast, look and see how many followers they have. Get those people that either you want to develop a relationship with inside an organization, or if they have a big following, because it's going to add to. And Frank is absolutely right. The pandemic, we were tripping over webinars last year. People started to get webinar fatigue. It's picking back up. I think people realized last year they didn't really want to be in person as much as they thought they did. We found that with our in-person events, it was really hard to get people. No one wants to come to a law firm to have a glass of champagne. I'm sorry, I hate to break it to you. They'll go there for education and CLE. They're not going there for social time. Those days are over. They didn't like them anyway. I used to stand there at the Christmas party and watch people come in and they'd lean over, how long do we have to stay here? Oh, 20 minutes, dear. So trust me on that. But the webinars are great. And if you're doing a webinar, record it if you can.
Right.
And then create snippets of video content, because what we're finding is there are people who want to attend the webinar live, and there are a lot of people who just want to watch it asynchronously. So this is live. I'm sure you guys will put a video up later. People like Frank and I will repost it. People will find it that way. They will find it for years to come. It's great for search engine optimization. And Frank is right. It's a great way to develop relationships. I don't know Frank. Frank doesn't know me. Frank may never want to talk to me again. But we now have this connection because Anjali brought us together. And that really, again, people used to say, I got to sponsor the Chamber of Commerce because I'm going to meet up with some people. Well, now you can meet people around the globe and have dialogue that is somewhat meaningful and leaves a record. And will it yield business immediately? Maybe not. But if you do enough of this and enough of this and enough of this, your name has recognition and people seek you out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Bang on.
For all three, I have a question for you. What strategies have you seen law firms implement to foster creativity and well-being in flexible workspaces, particularly in the context of high stress level environment?
Okay. So, I mean, in general, of course, my experience comes with outsourcing. And when I am in touch with attorneys and I'm talking to them, of course, the stress levels are really high. And that is why outsourcing comes into play, because it's going to ease out your workload. And if it works in a good way, it'll actually foster a very good collaboration between the team in US and the team which is there for you in India. But it needs to work out in a good way. It needs to be well thought of. There needs to be a process in place. There needs to be knowledge there needs to be some investment into technology to make it work actually. So, I mean, it's an absolute workable thing. You need to be progressive, of course, in thinking that, this is actually going to benefit you. And as we discussed earlier, there is a lot of pressure from the end clients of these attorneys, where the pressure is to reduce cost, but also deliver better and good results. So that when you club outsourcing in a good way, when it's a channelized way of working, it can actually yield really good results. And the way outsourcing has picked up over the years, I think the numbers talk for itself, that it is going to be there and it's going to pick up in the coming times. And I don't know whether to thank the pandemic for it or not, but yes, the push, I always say, has come from that, because those who did not use technology, who did not think about the virtual world, have now opened their minds towards it. They have gone in to at least acknowledge that there is something like this which exists, and it's something which anybody and everybody can use it if it is done in a good way.
So any anything to share, Frank or Roy? I think Roy has to go. So
Yeah, unfortunately, I have another meeting that is bumping up right against this. I hate to leave, but you nailed the answer as far as I'm concerned.
So if there is any question you guys have, you can share it with me, sagar@draftandcraft.com, and you already have info ID with you. So I would like to thank you everyone out there and all the attendees and the participants for your active participation and engaging questions. Your curiosity and enthusiasm are what make these webinars truly valuable. And before we sign off, I'm excited to announce that our third webinar is on 15th of May. That would be Law Firm and AI, the New Reality. Once again, thank you, Roy. Thank you, Frank. Thank you, Anjali. This is Sagar, and we look forward to welcoming you to next webinar. Until then, stay curious and keep exploring the possibility of legal world. Thank you.
Right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having
everybody.
us.
Thank you.
Thank